Good morning, everyone. How's everyone this morning?
Great.
That's it?
Well, it's exciting to get again for me.
Is that it? It's not raining and it's not cold. That's unusual for a coffee and conversation. So, everybody's good?
Good.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. All right, welcome to Coffee and Conversation. Coffee and Conversation is brought to you by our Government Affairs Committee from the South Padre Island Chamber of Commerce. My name is Jeanette, and I'm the President and CEO of the South Padre Island Chamber of Commerce. We want to thank Padre Island Brewing, Mark, Jose, Lori for hosting us this morning. We're also grateful that they were able to kind of switch up the schedule. I know everybody's confused. This is not Thursday, it is Wednesday, just so you know. And also Karla from Karla's Katering for the yummy pastries.
Yay.
And then, of course, our elected officials, we've got Reese Langston here, from council. And then on our board, we have our chairwoman, Wendy Knight. And we have Blake Henry from the city. Okay, once again, thank you all for being here. We are excited about today's presentation. We have with us Greg Weykamp. He is the co-founder of Edgewater Resources, a firm specializing in sustainable marine and waterfront development. With over 33 years of experience and a lifelong passion for boating, Greg has led major projects across the U.S., combining expertise in design, engineering, and operations. He's a recognized industry leader, frequent speaker, and co-author of the upcoming edition of ASCE Manual 50. Sounds riveting. The Standard Guide for Marine Design. So, we welcome Greg. Thank you for being here. And you can explain to us what ASCE is.
That would be the American Society of Civil Engineers, which I am not one.
Oh, there you go.
I'm actually a landscape architect. My job is to translate engineer to English. If you've ever worked with a lot of engineers, they like to use big words. And I'm a boater, I'm a sailor. I don't do as much fishing as everybody around here likes to do, but I'm learning. I'm Greg Weykamp. With us is Phil Hanley, who's on our team. He'll be joining us as well. Phil's the guy that goes out and counts the bugs and the bunnies and the seagrass and flies drones and makes people swim through the lake and everything else. So what we're talking about today is a project, we call it South Padre Island Brewing Park. We call it the Edgewater Resources, a bunch of different things. I think the main reason we call it South Padre Island Brewing Park is it's not just for the boaters, it's not just for the big boats that come in for TIF, although those are important, of course. It's really about getting as many people as possible out on the water and looking at sort of the next most innovative strategies for coastal engineering practices. So what you're seeing here is the site that we're looking at. This is the causeway coming in, and a couple of things. We've been looking at this project for 5 years, or 4. It feels longer, doesn't it? So when we do a project like this, just to figure out why we're here, what are we doing? And the idea is basically want to advance the viability of tourism. Right? We got tons of people that come down here to visit, amazing fishing, we're doing moderates, it's been fantastic. We want to expand access to the water for everybody. Anytime we talk about a marina, there's always this sort of the first feeling of it is, well, that's for the people with the 70-foot fishing boats, and that's not for me. Well, there's a lot more people waiting tables, working regular jobs, doing whatever they do that don't have access to that. We want to make sure that they've got access to the water as well. We want to leverage the revenues and the things that we can do by drawing those bigger boats here to help create public access for everybody. We want to build on the success of the reef. You've got so much really good, great things happening out there to get more and more people fishing. We want to make more capacity for visiting boats to come take advantage of that. Support the fishing tournaments up to 150 boats. Of course, when we look at any time we build anything, we want to minimize the environmental impact. We'll go into that in quite a bit of detail. Maximize the access. When we maximize public access, we also maximize the amount of funding participation we can get a hold of. So things like if we're going to build a structure to protect the marina, for example, can we also use that structure to create habitat for fish? Can we create show prominence as you come into South Padre Island. This could be a cool gateway feature when you see it as you come in. And then serving as many different types of boats as we can. Deep draft, of course. A good example of what we can build. This is a project in Fort Pierce, Florida. And one of the things that you'll see here is you're used to traditional breakwaters like you have at your entry, at the entry to the bay, the docks to you. And we're moving towards a different strategy. Instead of big, long, continuous monolithic structures, we're breaking them up into smaller pieces, and you'll start to see that here with some of these islands. And those little islands have a way of being able to provide the same level of protection from waves as a big continuous structure, but they also allow water to flow through for better water quality, for better habitat. The turtles can go through there. We don't have the boats necessarily go through those things, not the bigger boats, but paddlecraft can get in and out of there. So everything that you see here out in the water is constructed. There's none of those are natural islands. None of that was something that we restored. It was all basically open part of the coastal waterway. And it was all designed very specifically to protect the marina, but to do some other things in terms of managing the sediment that flows through so that we're not constantly dredging the marina. And in fact, the way that this is designed is it's self-dredging. The water that flows through here keeps the sediment moving along, and so they lower the dredging requirements quite dramatically at this marina. Plus, it's enough to protect from the hurricanes and everything else that goes on. So, how do you get onto some of these things? When you look at the causeway site, we'll talk about this in greater detail, but honestly, there's a lot of mangroves and seagrasses, and that's what Phil's done looking at. We need to minimize our impacts on those things. So, great, beautiful boardwalks and pathways to get out there. One of the things that we're used to in a lot of marinas is that once you get to the edge of the water, you're either a boater and you can go out there, or you're not a boater and you got to stand there looking at everybody else having fun. One of the things that we want to do is have that gate here be accessible to everybody to get all the way out to there, out to the breakwaters, and to see that in the plans. And then have access for things like paddlecraft rentals. You know, you can get out there on the water for maybe 10 or 15 bucks an hour, many people can afford. And then have a place for them to go when we get to these sort of island destinations. Paddlecraft, accessible fishing, accessible ADA access for, say, wounded warrior programs, things like that. There's tons of funding out there to build this kind of infrastructure, which is fun because it's not necessarily something that we have to come up with the money ourselves. It's we're creating access for many, many people. There's a lot of programs out there intended to help support that. Boat clubs. This is not being a member of a boat club. Any boat clubs here, Daniel? So the idea of a boat club, you know, if you grew up like me, you grew up boating, and you realize having a 150 Merc that said you could get either you sprayed it in from the 70s, and you either grew up knowing how to do that, or you're like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to get out of the water, I'm going to die, so what's that? Of course, now you get a boat, you open it up, and you're like, there's nothing but a plastic cup, there's nothing for you to fix, nothing you can touch. And some people get nervous about it. One of the things that a boat club's great for is before I make this huge investment buying a boat and learning all these different things, I can join a club, I can go use the boat, I can get out there, and I can come back and go, hey, Daniel, it's making a noise. See you next Tuesday. And that's the kind of thing that introduces people to boating, makes it much more affordable, much more accessible. And so those are things that we can also look to incorporate into the facility. All right. Can you hear me? All right, is this any better? Let's repeat. Okay. So when we build these structures, one of the things that we're going to have to do is go through what's called the joint evaluation meeting and all the different permitting processes with the Corps of Engineers, the state of Texas, and all the different agencies. And one of the things that we want to do is create the right types of habitat for the right types of species in this area. So the one I'm showing you in Florida is a great example. It has similar features. Bill's going to help us find the right species for here and exactly what we need to do. So we're getting birds. This is more pictures from that other facility in Fort Pierce. So all of the wiped out are full of birds that the folks said the birds would never come. The mangroves would never grow. And of course, it's grown like that. This is about 7 or 8 years old. So you look at that, you get out there, and it feels like it's been there forever. Very exciting stuff. Fish and mangroves and all that kind of thing. Excuse me. So when we do our computer modeling, this is what we're doing right now. I'm not getting some arcades on the exact progress of what we're doing. We're doing preliminary engineering, and when we design these structures, we need to make sure that they work with the currents, with the waves, with the sedimentation. And so we're doing computer structures in and remodel it, just to make sure it's going to work as it's supposed to. And then we can manage all the sediment moves. So if you can think of the causeway site and how we move things around, depths and dredging issues on our sea drainage, right? That's something that's kind of an area that you're probably, and we need to avoid doing that because it's a big environmental impact. But we can create these islands that have all these different features, so for different birds, for oysters, for the mangroves, and all the different turtles, all of that. So, as we get into this, we can use all these tools to manage how it works on the Padre side, but also at the same kind of strategy, you can also work on your beach side. This is a project that we just built, designed specifically to restore beaches and keep the waves from washing out our sand away. And we basically ended up with, this is the set of structures that can take the natural flow of currents and take the sand and turn it 180 degrees and put it on the beach without any kind of mechanical systems or anything else. And so this is a tool that can be used to help protect the beaches on the Gulf side as well. We're using the exact same strategies on the Washington side. So why do we do all these things? In terms of economic impacts, $7.7 billion is an annual impact in the state of Texas and voting. It's a pretty good number. I think Daniel probably feels he's responsible for 86% of that every year. I know it feels like that in my vote. So we call them boat units. A boat unit is $1,000. It's much easier to finance as a 3-boat unit problem as opposed to a $3,000 problem. Right? So boats are fun, but you send up, there's over 17, almost 1,800 businesses in the state of Texas, well over 500,000 boats, 25, almost 26,000 jobs for boating just in Texas. Right here in the South Padre Island area, your congressional district, it's coming up on $150 million, 56 different businesses. I don't know how many businesses, that's just in this congressional district here. Almost 10,600 boats registered here in this area. We look up at Port Aransas, Corpus Christi, it's a little bit bigger, 235 million. And the reason I bring up Port A and this Corpus market is some of those boats would otherwise be down here, except we don't have facilities for them. So the purpose of bringing it up and talking about this, not that we like to steal from our friends in Port Aransas and that area, but if they wanted to be here, they can't be here right now. That's where they are. So we want to be able to create some amenities and facilities where they can come down here. So, in terms of what would the actual economic impacts of a project be, and I'll show you this in a minute, what we're looking at, the project I'm going to show you, is looking at creating about 29 jobs, about $5 million in total. This is an industry input every year, about $3 million in added value, and about almost $1.5 million in labor income. So just from this one project. So a lot of economic impacts that we can document. This is from a tool that's this is my opinion, this is a tool that the University of Florida and College of Mary put together to figure out how just one facility can increase economic impacts in the community. So, what does it look like? So what we're looking at right now, here's the causeway. North is to the right. This is the KOA campground. Everybody familiar with what we're talking about? Sea Ranch is just down here. Mahi Nicks. I love the tacos. I was there last night. That's the best. They need to open on Monday night so I can eat there on Monday night. So what you're seeing on here, it's a little bit dark on the screen, but you'll see this a lot more. We'll get into it in detail here. But we have a lot of mangroves, we have a lot of seagrass, we've got the roadway down here. What we're trying to do, obviously, is not come in and wipe out all the seagrass and all the mangroves and build a big traditional marina basin. The reason for that is that there's such high impact that one would never get permitted to do. It's just the wrong thing to do. Right? That's not good for the environment. The right way to do it is there's an existing channel that was, this is from back before the causeway.
Back before the causeway, yeah.
When the ferries would bring it over from Port Isabel, they would come in right into this spot. So that's something that we'll all want to pick up on that story. So this was the landing of how you got out here at the time. So we're showing how we can connect with the boardwalk, get all the way up here, and then have floating docks, and then this is the marine park. And the purpose of all of that, one, is to protect and create a marina basin, and we can do all these other things we need to do for the fishing boats and visiting boats, and the public, and having a guide, but also creating a destination where you can get a pad and do something like this. We went back and did an economic market analysis back in 2022. And so before we go into all of this on this plan, we visited all the different marinas in this area, visited pretty much every marina that we can get to in Katering County. Went up to Port Aransas and Corpus Christi, looked at those facilities and documented the types of marina facilities they have, how occupied they are, what the rates are, what's working, what are the sort of very specific features that would make a marina economically and financially successful. And so we documented all those things, and that led to the design of this. This particular design approach is not a traditional marina design with all the traditional figures. This is a strategy it's called flexible broadside mooring. And the idea is that it will accept just about any boat that can get in there in terms of land. So we just built a marina in downtown Chicago that opened about 2 months ago. And since it's almost 100% transient, that means visiting boaters, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to have 20 60-foot slips, and I'm going to have 20 50-foot slips, and 20 40-foot slips, and so on, and trying to figure out how many exactly are those slips going to have. And then what happens is those boats don't show up, or the boat market changes. We built a marina like this, it's designed to last for 30 or 40 years. 30 or 40 years ago, the boats we were sailing around in are different than the boats we're in today. The boats we have today are a bit longer, they're much wider, they have a much higher electrical command. So we look at all those different market features and think about how do I build a marina that's going to be set up for the next 30 years, not for the last 30 years. So one of the advantages of having this flexible broadside is rather than trying to say, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get this many 70-footers and this many 60-footers, I have the ability to mix and match boats of any size alongside that broadside mooring. And it doesn't really matter what size the boat is. I can mix and match and create it as efficient as possible. So that marina we just opened in Chicago, instead of having the traditional mix and slips, has 17 piers that are 180 feet long. And so I could theoretically put 3,480 footers in there. Not that there's that many other great things. But I could also put it and mix it on any given pier. I could put a 150-foot boat on one side and 3 40-foot boats on another side of that same pier. So it's really, really flexible. And that means every dollar that you spend can be occupied, and depending on who's there, so you might have a different fishing tournament that draws a different size boat or a different type of boat or different mix. We can accommodate that. There might be a sailor guy that comes in. There might be different things over the next 30 years. Maybe the Cypriot market starts to come down this way a little further south than it has traditionally. So this will be flexible to adapt and account for any of that change in the future. So what we're doing right now on the engineering side of things is we've got the concept, we've gone through the market analysis, we've done a lot of grant funding. We actually received a lot of grant funding, $180,000 grant for some of the original engineering studies we've been doing. And we're now doing what we call preliminary engineering, where we test out all of our ideas at the master plan level. Just enough to say, yeah, I think this will work. My intuition tells me this. I've got enough research that says the water depths are where they need to be, and I think I can make this work. Now we have to go back and confirm it, and that's what we're just getting into. We will end up submitting what's called a joint permit application, which goes to the Corps of Engineers and the state of Texas, and that will take 1 year to 2 years to get through that whole process. But to do that, we're going to do things like bathymetry. So a bathymetric survey is just like a topographic survey of land. You go up the mountains, you see all the contour lines going up. Bathymetry is what the water's doing, what's the water depth below, so we need to know that, of course. We're looking at also wind wave action, we're looking at the sediment transport, that's the materials that move through the area, and doing all the environmental investigations that Phil's going to talk about here in just a minute. So again, this picture is a little bit muddy, sorry, but you've got mangroves kind of down in this area, and seagrass up in this area, and you can just barely make up that channel that comes into here. We're obviously going to take advantage of that channel so we don't have to pay money to create something that's already there. And more importantly, from an environmental perspective, it's not full of seagrass, it's not full of mangroves and things that we have to mitigate. So in the process of designing and engineering and permitting a project like this, there's 3 steps that we have to focus on. It's avoid the impact. So the first thing you have to do is don't put, back to both pages. We talk about avoid. Don't run the marina over here, right? Don't run it through the middle of all this stuff. Run it where the channel is. That's how you avoid impacts. We actually looked at another site, and that didn't work out with the county for whatever reason. We moved to this site. You avoid wake up in the morning and go out and take pictures of beautiful sunrises. So Phil, why don't you come on up here and walk us through this? Actually, for the last 2 months, if you've been out there, you've seen guys walking around with hard hats and bell vests and drones and swimming. That was Phil and his team.
Thank you, everybody. So,
You got to go close so they can hear you back.
we're very fortunate to be involved in this project. This was one of the mornings we were setting up our equipment. We had a nice big tea out over the wall, so thank you. So one of the first things we do is we bring in the surveyors to define the boundaries of the property. And then our company comes in with commercial drones and we do the mapping. The mapping consists of flying the drone back and forth, taking a lot of pictures, we call them all in the yard. We stitch all those pictures together into one of those things, so we've got one big image. The goal of the aerial imagery is to make it spatially accurate, so we put down ground control panels so that we can match it up to the surveyors. It also allows us, when we're out in the field, to zero in on areas. We do this first, we look at that imagery and say, okay, we need to go look at these areas in more detail. So this was my daughter, Hannah, and she's up there flying one of our drones at the very beginning of the project. This was in early August. Once we get the aerial imagery down, then we go on the ground, we start ground tripping everything. This is a couple of images of one on the right there is Brittany Michon. She's a local here, she works for me. She was out doing seagrass and oyster surveys. The picture on the left here, this is Yvonne Garcia, Resident Engineering, and Melinda Dunks, who works for me, and we were doing the coastal boundary survey. One of the things that we have to establish with that mangrove line between the mangroves and the seagrasses is where is the littoral boundary, because when we get into that permitting phase, the state of Texas will require this survey. So that's one of the first things we do is A, do the seagrass survey, but also define where that littoral boundary is, which is that mean high water. The Corps of Engineers uses that to determine anything landward of mean high water is one designation called Section 404. Anything seaward, that's called Section 10. So we're going to actually have two types of permitting on this project. We'll have some Section 10. Most of it will be dredging. Okay? That's where we look at that channel, existing channel. Anything we do on the other side of that line, on the upland portion, is going to be what we call Section 404. Diamond walls, filling, and that type of thing. This is hard to see, but this is an aerial image. Three of my girls
It's the
out there.
pale blue dot image from space.
Yeah, they're out there doing seagrass surveys. And we finished up the flight, we still had some battery left, so I went down here and buzzed them, with the drone.
Very good people swimming.
So anyway, this is some more, here's some more seagrass survey. On the right there, when we flew the drones to do the orthomosaics and the imagery and everything, we also flew LiDAR. But the only problem was so much of this site was flooded permanently with water. So LiDAR didn't do any good. So we had to get it up and manually slug through the mangroves and the marsh and everything, and supplement that LiDAR data with some physical topo surveys. This is an aerial image, it's an oblique image of the existing channel. That channel, as Greg pointed out, is very critical to permittability of this project. Because, as Greg mentioned, we want to keep the impacts, the environmental impacts of this project to a minimum. So the first thing we had to do was we had to identify where that existing channel is. The next thing we had to do is look inside that channel and outside and determine seagrasses and oysters. Okay, great. So what we did is we set up a series of transect lines to do a general characterization of what type of seagrasses are out there, what the percentage cover is, and we also looked at oysters. There are quite a bit of oyster beds out there. Now, only about maybe 30 or 40% of it was actual live oysters. The oysters, when they die off, you see the existing shells, and then the larvae of the new spawn will kind of build on top of it. So you get these big oyster clusters out there. And so along the edges of the main channel right in here is what we concentrated that is kind of saturated that with our labor effort. Because that channel becomes very important. What we discovered was inside the channel, there's no seagrasses and there's no oysters, which is ideal for our project here because that means when we look at permitting this, we keep that to a minimum. The width of the existing channel is 150 feet at the narrowest portion, which is right in here. The opening in towards the bay and then down at the end, they're up around 180 feet wide. Okay? So when we look at the site plan, the very preliminary site plan, we have plenty of room to put that central boardwalk down through the center that the boats can moor on either side, make it wide enough, ideal maybe 20 feet room, so that the carts can get back and forth if we have a good traffic pattern. But it's also wide enough that you can get big enough boats in there where they have enough room to moor and then turn around and go back out and have safe traffic. So we covered that area, we saturated. We do know that on the rim, on the outside edge of that channel, we've got a lot of oysters and a lot of seagrass. So it's going to be a very nice task to avoid that as much as possible. We do know that up here at the mouth right here, this is silted back in from the original bridge that was there. So we do have some seagrass in there. We have very little oyster, but we know we got some seagrass. We covered it well enough so that when we get into the planning phase of this, we can avoid as much of that seagrass as possible. Then as the pictures, as we go over the pictures, the girls down on the ground slugging through the mangroves, trying to get the topographical point down. This is all the topo points that we shot in. Some of it we still were in. The mangroves will show that we just couldn't get in there. So we're looking at some alternate methods. I'm toying with some ideas with one of our runs where we may be able to go in there and do some spot elevations. So overall, environmentally, when we look at what's out there and the goal we want to accomplish with building this project, everything so far has been pretty good.
Thanks, Phil. All righty. So what Phil is wrapping up his work, he's got another 2 or 3 weeks worth of
bathymetry starts the end of this week.
Exactly. So what's going to happen now is the shifts from Phil's research team to our engineering team. Our chief modeler, LA, is working on this. And what I like about that, so you've got the NOAA maps we're used to seeing in these locations here. But she's doing different things, looking at the wind and waves. And so this is what's called windrows up here. And so these colors indicate a couple of different things, these big wedges. So this is the highest winds, but also the highest frequency. So on our particular site here, the highest winds and the highest frequency of those winds comes out of the south and southeast. Obviously, we know about the hurricanes coming from other directions. So we have to design the marina around all these different type of features, recognizing those predominant regular winds and then the occasional storm series and things like that. So LA is working on all of this right now to sort of test out the concepts, make sure that they're going to work. And then we're doing things in terms of how we model both the waves and the sediment movement through the site. We do that with hydro management model. And so what you're seeing here is the whole of the Madre, or a large piece of it. You see these larger triangles as sparser data points, which is fine because it's a farther away as you get closer to our site. The density certain lines of attack where the wind could get through the waves, could do certain things. So that's the process that we're in right now, is this process of refinement to figure all of that out. And so that's where we're at. And as we think about what those islands would look like, it's a series of, this might be where some of the dredge materials go, and then we get certain amount of rock materials, and then we come in and we start to build on the habitat features over the top. And so those islands I showed you in Fort Pierce, Florida, they're huge. The oysters have really colonized those things like crazy. In fact, they colonized with just a little bit at the start, and then before they could get back to the bottom season to do further continent, the Arctic would take over. So it's been amazing how all that has worked. We look at these different intricate shapes here to create either lagoon pockets or juvenile fish habitat pockets. So if you're looking for a good place to go fishing, this is going to be fantastic because it's going to be designed very intentionally around those features. So this is where we're at in the process. And it's question time. So right at the beginning here, we're going to be spending probably the next 3 months. We'll be finishing up the preliminary engineering. We'll be submitting permit applications early next year. And then that process will go, it just takes 2 years. It's just a long, slow process. We're all used to that in this industry. It feels like it takes forever. That marina just opened in Chicago. We started on in 2016. That had a 4-year political delay in the middle, but otherwise it would have still been a 5 or 6 year project. That's just how long this has been. So, are there any questions about any of this?
I've got a bunch of them.
Let's hear it.
So, my name's Glenn Harrison. Coming in, I mean, this has been rumored to be happening and bandied about for years. Which, you know, I'm tacitly excited that it might be coming to fruition. Who's paying you?
So,
For whom do you work? Like,
so the question is
is it City of South Padre Island, or is it?
Yeah, the EDC is paying us. So the EDC is paying us business support from the city.
Okay, and then what's going to be the ask from the City of South Padre Island? Like, this is never about, this is a nifty presentation, but what's the ask?
Sure. Well, so in terms of how do you get something to build, right? So the way projects of this scale get built is typically through what's called a public-private partnership. And so I'll tell you this, from the economic standpoint of building a marina, and I own and operate marinas, the marina needs to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, to pay for all the dock infrastructure, the utilities, the operations, maintenance, all of those sorts of things. And to get that to happen, we can rely on the private sector to do that. So not necessarily what will happen here, because either in a scenario like this, the first thing you have to do is create a safe harbor for it. And so you can see examples of these all over the country. The South Padre Island Marine Park, the islands create the safe harbor that creates the conditions where the marina can be built.
We understand.
Right.
What's the financial ask from the city?
So how do you get there? So in terms of how do you build that breakwater is tens of millions of dollars. The one I showed you in Florida is $20 million. That particular one in Florida was funded by FEMA because they have been recovering so much damage. There are other programs that we're looking at with GLO, Visa, all the different programs to do this. So the idea is to get public funding for the breakwater structures, and that can be part local funding. It's mostly we look at grant funding. Because at this scale, we're creating a park and amenity and a habitat feature. So we're going to look at all these different funding sources, whether they're for FEMA, on down to state and local funding for that. When you get to actually constructing the marina, there are plenty of places where there's multiple models. One, a local community can say, you know what, we can build that marina because we know it's going to stand on its own 2 feet economically. So Port of Rochester Marina, we're seeing the one in Fort Pierce, that marina in Fort Pierce is owned by the city. Other places, we're working with one of the water districts up in Dallas right now to help them. They just built the Edgewater Resources, for example. Similar kind of idea. The public created the water body, the reservoir, and they brought in us to help them find a private developer who's going to come in and build a marina. And so we would just help them through a 2-year selection process. They now have selected a private developer who's going to go and build that marina. So the actual final economics of how this thing gets built, certainly we need grant funding to help us support the construction of the breakwaters because they're not going to generate sufficient revenue on their own to fund their construction. The rest of it should generate enough economic activity to fund this out. That's typically how this gets approached. How exactly we choose to get there is to be determined.
So I'm assuming at some point the city of South Padre Island's electorate would be asked to pass a bond to fund X portion of this? Is that where we're headed?
I don't know if we're there yet specifically. The answer is going to come down to is how much grant funding do we get? And so we need to identify all the different grants that we can get, apply for all the grants that we get, and see how far down the path of the funds did we get. Then if we're coming up short, the question is okay, how do we make up that shortfall? Is that shortfall made up by either a local bond fund? Is it made up by one of these folks? You know, let's say you're private build arena. They're going to pay money to occupy that space. That is another source of funding to support that debt, for example. So there's different ways to get it done, and I don't think anybody can tell you today exactly what the method will be. We're probably 3 years away from knowing how much grant funding we'll have, and then saying, okay, we need to make up $1 million or $10 million or whatever the number is, and then there's multiple strategies to address it.
I'm not trying to slam the floor. Now go ahead, Gail.
Lynn, so to address that, EDC, their goal is to get this to permitting, and we will need the help of the city to help us with the permitting because they don't have more clout than the EDC or anyone else. But we do have private investors that are interested in taking it at that point, and two that I've talked to, nothing in writing, so it's not anything I can disclose because we don't know for sure. But there are parties interested in actually building and operating it. So the city will need to decide what they want to do at that point, if they want to keep it or not. But I think the goal has always been to have a private investor come in at that point. But we have budgeted to complete this to permitting. So we are going a lot faster now than we did in another location.
So have there been thoughts about, I know Cameron County has been all but refusal to do anything with Sea Ranch. When they start seeing the hot girl come to town, do they start getting in shape? And do they decide to go, you know what, let's do this thing. Let's go ahead and scrape out Sea Ranch, expand it back into the campground, dig slips out, dredge, and they're in business. Like they're shovel ready right now, if they wanted to be. So, do we feel like there's the potential that we poke the bear a little bit and we cut our own knees out from underneath ourselves on this deal? Or is there demand? Do we anticipate that there's enough demand?
Let me back up. So when we started this study originally, we had 2 sites. This is where it's going. There was this site here, which we call the causeway site, and then there's the site here, which we call the Sea Ranch site. I went out to the Sea Ranch site. It looks very much like this one in terms of having a breakwater. You need to breakwater in a safe harbor in either location. That is the biggest, highest cost, and it's the biggest cost that's non-revenue generating. So in either location, you're going to need that type of protection to make it function properly. They couldn't, I would say environmental, they could not just go barrel into dredging out.
No, I mean, all the Sea Ranch has to do is just expand inland into their park. Scoop it out, dig it deep. They've already got a channel. They just need to actually dredge it for once, and then they've got a deep water marina.
It's a lot more complicated than that. I'll tell you this: there are no sites here where we can just. I built the marina, like I've done that. There's great locations out there. All the easy places are done. There are no easy places on South Padre Island to build a marina. So I'll disagree a little bit that all they have to do is X. Because from the permitting perspective and everything else, it's a lot more complicated than that. Or to the bigger point, what if they went ahead and built the other one? Would that harm this marina? Absolutely not. We actually look at these two as long-term. I would guess that in 30, 40 years, both marinas will be here. I really genuinely think that because the growth of boating, the growth of this market, the growth of Texas population in general, I see this happening. So it doesn't bother me the least the notion of, oh, what if they did it too? Great. One of the things that's odd in the marina world is I don't think of marinas as really having competitors. Marinas as a business are one of the most mutually supporting businesses out there. The more marinas you have, typically you have better boating opportunities. In my area of Southwest Michigan where I live, we have 18 wineries in an area like it was part of a small county. And I just remember asking, only the way this is sort of set up at the moment is around the idea of mostly a transient facility. The transient marinas generate less parking demand than a seasonal facility. We'll have to look at that as we go through. And that's one thing that Phil's going to help us figure out is just how much Phil can we do to get those things working. So one of the things I point out with parking and activities like this is we can do more to, there's parking opportunities, areas across the street, more shuttling. Clearly, this whole marina there is going to be predicated on access with golf carts because it's a long way out to the water. There's no easy site to build it. We did actually look at a concept where we basically excavated the basin out back here, and the boats at the gym were like, yeah, that's great, next. Now it's important that we do that when we go through the joint evaluation committee. We need to show that we explored all of the different opportunities, all the different options that were available to us, including multiple sites. So everything that we did at the Sea Ranch actually works in our favor in the permitting of this site because we can demonstrate that we've done all these different research points. So ultimately with parking demand, every community like yours has a parking problem. The only parking problem I ever worry about, I live in a small resort community, the only parking problem I worry about is empty parking spaces. If people are struggling to park and they're complaining about parking, we're doing something right. My hometown went 8 this summer. They've been yelled at for so long about parking that they finally went out and they put parking meters. They decided we're going to make people pay for the parking, and that way the shop owners will finally stop letting their employees park in front of the 4 parking spaces in front of their shop. And so they said, we're charging them. And it's funny, how many of you are business owners here? Right? How many of you would let your employees take these parking spaces right here in front of your business? Anybody? So many communities do that. My point on parking is we have to solve it. We have to create the most practical solution that we can. We can't ever let parking drive all of our conversations because ultimately parking isn't the problem in a community like this. It's getting people who want to be here. We've done many studies. That project I mentioned in Port of Rochester, New York, it was a community that had 1,400 parking spaces right on a beach and on a river, and a beautiful little shops right there. Now, if you're right there on the best beach in the whole region, and you're 8 miles from downtown Rochester, which is what, like 200 people or something, you would think that that would be a thriving beachfront activity area. It had one little ice cream shop, one greasy spoon diner, and like 2 t-shirt shops. The reason for it is because they solved their parking problem. They have so much parking that nobody wants to hang out there because it's like hanging out in the Walmart parking lot, right? The idea of this, we asked them, what kind of a waterfront community do you want to be? And they said, oh, we want to be like Niagara on the Lake, and we want to be like this place and that place and Sackus Harbor. I went and drove every one of those places and visited all of them and said, what attracts you to this community? What do you like to see when you're here? Oh, I like the shops. I like to be able to walk down the street and do all these different things. And I did the family vacation or all area of the country, and I came back and did the same presentation with the same people who said, you can't take away, we have to take out 120 parking spaces to build this marina. Like, you can't take away 10% of our parking because it's going to just devastate our neighborhood. Showed them all the pictures of all the different places that they wanted to be like. And they're looking like, yeah, that. Okay, where did you park when you went to those places? I don't know, we dropped everybody off and I went to park and I was a couple blocks away. My point being is parking, if we let parking drive every decision, we're not going to build anything. So we'll have a practical solution. We'll get as much parking as we possibly can, but we need to come up with shuttling solutions, access solutions. If the answer is we can't build it, if we can't park every single car there, then you're never going to build anything that's coming in. You just can't. So. Yeah,
I wouldn't imagine that in a mangrove sanctuary, it's very typical. Oh, you want me to use this? Okay. I said I wouldn't imagine in a mangrove sanctuary, it's very typical to have a 150-foot channel dug through there. Did your researchers find any evidence as to how that came to be?
The existing channel? Yeah, Phil found out, or somebody found, Phil maybe that it was the original access point where the bears came over from Brisbane. So reusing it for that purpose, that's kind of the ideal thing. When you're doing permitting, if you can come in and, okay, here's an impact, we're going to reuse the impact, that's what it came from. So.
And you don't think that was a natural channel that drained that flat and they just utilized that for the ferries because it was there?
It could have potentially, that could have been why it started there But the well could have been the start of it, for sure. That's what we're looking for.
You mentioned at the start of your parking dismissal that you expected this to be mostly transient slips. How is that humanly possible when you're trying to suck every boat out of, like, Dagan's boat's going to leave and leave Sea Ranch, move over. Dagan Cole, all the boats theoretically are going to leave Sea Ranch and move there. None of those are.
Nobody said that.
No, I mean, I would want to, like, if I was building this, I want to suck every boat from Port Aransas, Port O'Connor down here.
Yeah.
Like, I want to crush my competition. I love you, but I'm going to knock you down. I'll help you up after, but I'm going to knock you down again. So, most of these won't be transient. Most of them, I would hope, if I was building this, would be permanent. Monthly rentals forever. So that's not transient. So where's your idea that transient means they're weekenders, they launch at a boat ramp that I don't see, they stay there for the weekend, or they sail in from Corpus, they stay the weekend and go home. Where do you get that data? What's the idea?
Let me back up, since you've had like conversations. So, when I did dismiss parking, I said that we're going to have as much parking as we can practically provide and it'll be sufficient.
If you're saying it's not a thing. It is
No,
a
I
thing.
did not say something. I said we can't dismiss something because, oh, if I don't have every piece of parking in my month, that's number one. Number two, transient data. We're actually getting transit funding for specifically for transit voting infrastructure grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We've already gotten a grant for $180,000 from them, and they're very supportive, and we can probably get another $1.5 million from them to build that. The data on transit voting and the demand comes from our research and market study in terms of where the other boats are, the fishing tournaments, and everything else. We are specifically not going to build it as a route to try and suck out all the boats from Sea Ranch or other facilities. We're trying to create activities for more boating, to get more activity down here for the fishing tournaments. So yeah, there's going to be some, maybe half of it will be seasonals, and maybe half of it will be transient, and the same with transient. So it's a mix of all of those things, and that's what creates the most healthy marina economics.
It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm not saying I'm still not for it. I'm just saying that seems wildly odd. Where's the boat ramp going to be?
There's a boat ramp that exists right here, and one of the things that you don't necessarily have to have in the marina is a boat ramp.
That's a causeway campground, and it's run by SpaceX, and no one can really launch there.
Well, you don't have to have we don't have to have a boat launch in every single marina, particularly for a transit. Is that confusing to you?
What?
I build marinas, dude, I've done this for 30 years. We don't necessarily put boat ramps in every single marina. Boats are in the water, they can come to the marina from any location. We don't have to. In fact, when you put in a boat ramp inside a marina, it's actually a conflict because what you end up with a boat ramp is very large amounts of trailer space. So you end up with empty cars and trailers that take up that parking that could otherwise be used for the active boating for the tournaments. So we regularly relocate boat ramps separate from marinas because of the beauty of a boat ramp is the boat can move, you can put the car there. You want to put the marina in the best possible location to attract as many boaters as possible. You don't have flooding or wave damage and so forth. Okay. That's the whole purpose of the island structure, is to basically create that protection and prevent storm damage from beating up the marina and tearing up the sea grasses and the windows. In terms like for the marina itself? It's typical marines and commercial insurance, just like every other business.
And then, when do you, what's the timeline for the environmental feasibility study?
I would say the environmental feasibility studies will be completed through the permitting process, which is probably 18 to 24 months, maybe 30 months.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you for the information, Greg and Phil. It's exciting to hear. I also want to thank Gail and the EDC for suggesting that they come and speak with us again today to give us this update. Before I let you go, I just want to let you know a couple of changes